Imagine walking into Avengers Doomsday expecting another massive Marvel crossover, only to walk out realizing there isn't actually a Marvel Cinematic Universe left to save. Every city you followed for nearly 2 decades, every timeline, every victory, every sacrifice, gone. Not because the heroes failed to stop one villain in one battle, but because reality itself finally reached its breaking point. It sounds impossible at first. Marvel spent years building this universe brick by brick, movie after movie, introducing characters who became part of our lives. Destroying all of that in a single film almost feels unthinkable. But the more closely you look at where the multiverse saga has been heading, the less impossible that ending becomes. In fact, a growing number of Marvel fans believe Avengers Doomsday isn't being designed as the biggest battle in MCU history. They believe it's being built as the moment the MCU itself finally collapses. And what's fascinating is that this idea isn't coming out of nowhere. It's coming from clues, patterns, and fan theories that, when connected together, create a story far darker than anything Marvel has attempted before. Because if those theories are even partially true, then Doomsday won't end with celebration. It won't end with heroes standing victorious. It could end with the complete destruction of everything we've spent almost 20 years watching. And that possibility changes the way we look at this movie before it has even arrived. What's even more interesting is that every major fan theory surrounding Avengers Doomsday seems to point toward exactly the same destination, even though they all begin from completely different places. One theory focuses on Dr. Doom himself. Another revolves around the destruction of the multiverse. A third imagines Earth's greatest heroes turning against each other before realizing they've been fighting the wrong enemy all along. And another places Loki and the TVA at the center of a desperate mission to save reality. On the surface, those ideas almost feel unrelated. But if you follow each one carefully, they don't move away from one another. They slowly begin converging toward a single event that Marvel readers have known about for years: Battleworld. That's what makes these discussions so exciting. Instead of asking who wins, fans have started asking a much bigger question. What if nobody actually wins? Because sometimes defeating the villain isn't enough. Sometimes the battlefield itself disappears. Sometimes reality stops existing before the heroes even get the chance to save it. And if Marvel truly wants Avengers: Secret Wars to become the biggest cinematic event in superhero history, then perhaps the only way to achieve that scale is by allowing everything to fall apart first. Naturally, every conversation begins with one man: Dr. Doom. Not simply because he's expected to become the central antagonist, but because Marvel made one creative decision that immediately changed the way everyone looked at this movie. Robert Downey Jr. is back. The same face that carried the MCU from Iron Man all the way to Avengers. Endgame is now returning as its greatest threat. That decision alone sparked thousands of theories almost overnight. The biggest misconception, however, is assuming this version of Dr. Doom is secretly the Tony Stark we already know. The Tony who sacrificed himself against Thanos. The Tony whose story reached one of the most emotional endings in superhero cinema. But that's not the theory gaining the most momentum online. The far more compelling possibility is that this isn't our Tony Stark at all. This is an entirely different man from an entirely different universe. Someone who only happens to wear the same face. And that small difference changes absolutely everything. Because if Doom isn't our Tony, then the emotional conflict isn't about redemption, it's about recognition. Imagine Earth's mightiest heroes looking into the face of the friend they lost, while standing before someone who has never loved them, never fought beside them, and never made the sacrifice that saved the universe. To the Avengers, that face represents hope. To Dr. Doom, it's just his own face. There's no emotional connection from his perspective, only from theirs. And that's exactly what makes the situation so unsettling. Now think about how psychologically devastating that would be for every character involved. Pepper sees Tony's face. Peter Parker sees the mentor who changed his life. Rhodey sees his best friend. Even characters like Sam Wilson or Bruce Banner would instantly be reminded of everything they lost. But standing in front of them wouldn't be the man they remember. It would be someone shaped by a completely different history, a different world, and perhaps entirely different ambitions. Instead of using nostalgia as a comforting callback, Marvel could transform it into one of the most disturbing weapons Dr. Doom possesses. Every conversation becomes emotionally unbalanced before it even begins. Every hesitation during battle gives Doom another advantage, because while the heroes struggle to separate the man they loved from the villain standing before them, Doom has no reason to hesitate at all. He isn't carrying their memories. He's carrying his own. That alone makes him dramatically different from villains like Thanos. Thanos wanted balance. Kang wanted control over time. But if these fan theories are correct, Dr. Doom doesn't simply want power. He wants to reshape existence itself. And that's where the next theory begins pushing this story into territory the MCU has never fully explored before. Throughout the Multiverse saga, Marvel has repeatedly warned us about one terrifying concept: incursions. The idea sounds simple until you understand its consequences. Two universes begin colliding with one another. At first, it may appear like isolated anomalies, strange events, or unstable realities bleeding together. But eventually, the collision reaches a point where neither universe can survive. One world dies, or both do. We've already seen Marvel introduce this danger as something that exists within the rules of the multiverse. But what if Dr. Doom doesn't fear incursions? What if he actually needs them? This is where one of the most fascinating fan theories begins to take shape. Instead of preventing universes from colliding, Dr. Doom intentionally accelerates those collisions. Instead of protecting reality, he systematically pushes it toward collapse. Every incursion becomes another step in a much larger design. Every destroyed universe removes another piece from an impossibly complicated multiversal puzzle. At first, that almost sounds self-destructive. Why would anyone deliberately erase entire realities? Until you remember one important detail. Destruction doesn't always represent the end of a plan. Sometimes it's the beginning of a completely different one. According to this theory, Dr. Doom isn't trying to rule one universe. That goal would actually be far too small for someone operating on a multiversal scale. Instead, he allows reality after reality to fall apart until countless universes have been reduced to fragments. Imagine billions of lives disappearing, entire civilizations erased. Heroes losing worlds they swore to protect, and once enough of those universes have collapsed, Doom gathers whatever remains, not to restore them individually, but to combine them, piece by piece, reality by reality, until something entirely new is born, a single world stitched together from the broken remains of countless others. A place where different histories, different timelines, different versions of heroes and villains are forced to exist side by side, not because they chose to, but because there is nowhere else left to go. That world has a name that Marvel comic readers know very well: Battleworld. And suddenly, the title Avengers. Secret Wars starts feeling much less like the next movie, and much more like the unavoidable consequence of everything that happened before it. Once Battleworld enters the conversation, something remarkable happens to every other fan theory. They stop feeling isolated. Instead, they begin fitting together like missing pieces of the same puzzle. Because if Dr. Doom truly intends to reshape reality itself, then defeating him won't be as simple as assembling the Avengers for one final fight. Before the heroes can even understand what he's trying to accomplish, they'll already be dealing with another crisis unfolding right in front of them, one that may leave them too divided to recognize the real enemy. At first, that division almost seems impossible. After everything the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been through, you'd expect the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men to recognize a multiversal threat immediately and stand together from the very beginning. But history tells a completely different story. One of the oldest patterns in superhero storytelling is that powerful teams rarely trust each other when they first meet. They don't share the same experiences, they don't answer to the same leaders, and they almost never agree on who is actually responsible for the crisis unfolding around them. Now imagine that tension multiplied across an unstable multiverse where entire realities are beginning to collide. Every universe believes it's the one worth saving. Every hero believes they're protecting innocent lives, and every decision they make could accidentally erase someone else's world. Suddenly, there isn't a clear right or wrong anymore. There are only impossible choices. That's exactly why one of the strongest fan theories suggests that Avengers Doomsday won't begin with everyone charging toward Doctor Doom. Instead, it may begin with the heroes turning on each other first. And when you look at the footage Marvel has officially shown so far, it's easy to understand why so many fans believe this theory has real weight behind it. The trailer strongly suggests that the new Avengers, working alongside Reed Richards, find themselves in direct conflict with the X-Men rather than standing beside them. While Marvel hasn't officially revealed the full context behind those scenes, the images have fueled one major interpretation across the fan community. These teams may genuinely believe the other side is responsible for the catastrophe. From their perspective, that conclusion would actually make perfect sense. Imagine discovering that another universe has suddenly appeared in your sky, threatening everything you've ever known. You don't immediately assume there's an invisible mastermind manipulating events from behind the scenes. You react to the danger directly in front of you. If another team arrives with powers you've never seen before, claiming they're trying to save their own reality, suspicion becomes almost unavoidable. Both sides believe they're protecting innocent people. Both sides think they're preventing disaster. And because neither side has the full picture, every attempt to stop the other only pushes the multiverse closer to collapse. That's what makes this conflict so tragic. It isn't driven by hatred. It isn't fueled by revenge. It's built on misunderstanding. The Avengers aren't evil. The X-Men aren't villains. The Fantastic Four aren't trying to conquer anyone. They're simply making decisions based on the limited information available to them. Meanwhile, Doctor Doom doesn't need to convince anyone to join him. He only needs to let fear do the work. Every battle between the heroes buys him more time. Every disagreement distracts them from his real objective. Every destroyed city, every collapsing universe, every failed negotiation becomes another step toward the future he's already planned. That's what separates an ordinary villain from someone like Doom. A typical villain attacks directly because they believe strength alone guarantees victory. Dr. Doom understands something far more dangerous. The easiest way to defeat heroes isn't by overpowering them. It's by making them fight battles they were never supposed to fight in the first place. Think back to some of Marvel's biggest crossover moments. Captain America fought Iron Man before they could stand together again. Thor and Hulk clashed before becoming allies. Even the Avengers themselves had to overcome distrust before becoming Earth's mightiest heroes. Marvel has always used conflict between heroes as a way to reveal character. But this time, the stakes are infinitely higher. This isn't one team arguing over politics or responsibility. This is multiple universes fighting for the right to survive. Every punch thrown, every power unleashed, every tactical decision could weaken the only people capable of stopping the true architect behind the chaos. And if Doctor Doom has intentionally engineered that outcome, then he's already winning long before the final battle even begins. That's why so many fans believe the emotional turning point of Avengers Doomsday won't come from a spectacular action sequence. It'll come from the moment every hero realizes they've been solving the wrong problem all along. Imagine that realization spreading across the battlefield. The Avengers begin uncovering evidence that the incursions weren't random. Reed Richards starts connecting scientific patterns that don't make sense if these collisions are happening naturally. The X-Men recognize that someone has been manipulating events from the shadows rather than simply reacting to them. One by one, pieces of the puzzle begin falling into place. Suddenly, every earlier conflict looks different. Every misunderstanding feels orchestrated. Every battle between heroes becomes another move in a game they never realized they were playing. And standing at the center of that game is Doctor Doom, watching entire universes exhaust themselves before he ever has to reveal the full extent of his own power. That's the kind of reveal capable of completely changing the emotional direction of the movie. What began as a war between heroes transforms into a desperate race against someone who has been thinking several steps ahead from the very beginning. But even if every major team eventually unites, another question immediately appears. Is that alliance actually enough? Because by that point, Doctor Doom may no longer be fighting for control of a single planet or even a single universe. If the incursions have already reached a critical stage, reality itself could be unraveling faster than anyone can repair it. Winning one battle wouldn't restore the countless worlds that have already disappeared. Saving one Earth wouldn't stop thousands of others from collapsing. And that's where another fascinating fan theory begins entering the conversation. One that shifts the focus away from the heroes we've already met and towards someone who's been quietly holding the multiverse together ever since the end of Loki Season 2. At the conclusion of that story, Loki accepted perhaps the greatest burden any Marvel character has ever carried. He didn't become a king in the traditional sense. He became the living foundation holding together countless branching timelines. Every universe continued existing because someone was willing to remain behind and carry the weight of all of them. It was one of the most emotional endings Marvel has ever created because Loki finally found glorious purpose, not through conquest, but through sacrifice. Yet that ending also raised an enormous question that Avengers Doomsday may finally answer. What happens when the threat isn't simply unstable timelines anymore? What happens when someone deliberately begins destroying the branches Loki is trying to protect? Even someone with incredible power cannot preserve a multiverse that's being systematically torn apart from the inside. This is why many fans believe Loki won't remain a distant observer while Doctor Doom reshapes reality. Instead, he could become one of the first characters to fully understand what's happening. From his unique position, he'd see incursions spreading across the multiverse long before anyone else realizes the scale of the disaster. Entire branches would begin disappearing. Timelines that once existed would simply stop. And if Doctor Doom's plan truly involves forcing universes together to create Battleworld, Loki would understand something terrifying before everyone else does. By the time the heroes recognize the danger, it may already be too late to save the multiverse as they know it. The mission would no longer be preventing collapse, it would be surviving what comes after. From that moment, another organization suddenly becomes far more important than most people expected. The TVA. Ever since the Time Variance Authority transformed from controlling timelines to protecting them, its entire purpose has changed. They're no longer trying to preserve one sacred timeline at the expense of every other reality. Their mission now is far bigger. They exist to safeguard the multiverse itself. But if Doctor Doom has found a way to weaponize incursions on an unimaginable scale, then even the TVA could find itself overwhelmed. Imagine receiving reports that one universe has disappeared, then another, then 10 more. Eventually, those reports stop being isolated incidents and become a full-scale multiversal extinction event. At that point, following normal procedures wouldn't matter anymore. The only option left would be assembling every possible ally before reality completely collapses. And that's exactly where one of the most exciting fan theories begins to make perfect narrative sense. Instead of relying only on the heroes currently living inside the main MCU timeline, Loki and the TVA could begin searching across the multiverse for champions from countless different realities. Not because they're building the biggest superhero team ever assembled simply for spectacle, but because every universe has experienced different histories, different victories, and different failures. Somewhere in the multiverse, there may be heroes who have already faced threats similar to Doctor Doom. Somewhere else, there may be variants who survived incursions that destroyed everyone around them. Others may possess knowledge that doesn't exist anywhere in the main MCU. Suddenly, bringing together variants isn't just fan service. It becomes the only logical strategy left when every conventional solution has already failed. That idea also explains why Marvel has spent so much time introducing the concept of variants throughout the multiverse saga. At first, many people believed variants existed simply to create fun, alternate versions of familiar characters, different Lokis, different Spider-Men, different versions of Doctor Strange. But what if all of those stories were quietly preparing audiences for something much larger? Variants aren't interesting because they look different. They're interesting because they prove that every universe develops its own unique history. Every choice creates a different outcome. Every reality produces heroes shaped by completely different experiences. If Loki and the TVA truly begin recruiting across the multiverse, then every new arrival would represent more than nostalgia. They would represent another surviving piece of a reality that's already been lost, and that gives every character an emotional weight beyond simply appearing on screen. Now imagine the emotional scale of that situation. Some heroes may arrive knowing their universe no longer exists. Others may be the final survivor of an entire civilization. Some could have watched their own Avengers fail. Others may have already fought versions of Doctor Doom and barely escaped. Instead of introducing countless characters just to fill the screen, Marvel could give each of them a shared purpose. They aren't fighting only to protect their future anymore. They're carrying the memory of worlds that have already disappeared. In a story centered around the collapse of the multiverse, that kind of emotional motivation becomes incredibly powerful. Because every battle against Doctor Doom would also become a battle for everyone they couldn't save. But here's where all four of these fan theories suddenly connect into one complete picture. Doctor Doom isn't simply another villain trying to conquer Earth. He's a multiversal strategist who may deliberately trigger incursions. Those incursions force universes to collide until reality begins collapsing. As the crisis grows, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men initially clash because they misunderstand what's really happening, allowing Doom's larger plan to continue unchecked. Meanwhile, Loki and the TVA recognize the true scale of the catastrophe and begin assembling heroes from across the multiverse. Every individual theory supports the next one, and together they all point toward the exact same destination. Not an ordinary ending where the heroes celebrate another victory, but an ending where reality itself is fundamentally transformed. If that transformation truly happens, then Battleworld stops being just another comic book reference and becomes the unavoidable consequence of everything we've been watching. Think about what Battleworld actually represents. It's not simply a battlefield. It's a world created from the shattered remains of countless destroyed universes, stitched together after the multiverse can no longer exist in its original form. Heroes who should never have met are forced to coexist. Entire histories overlap. Different versions of familiar characters occupy the same reality because every separate universe they once belonged to is gone. Suddenly, the impossible becomes normal. And from a storytelling perspective, that creates opportunities unlike anything the MCU has ever attempted before. More importantly, it perfectly sets the stage for Avengers: Secret Wars. Instead of spending half of that film explaining why characters from different universes are suddenly together, Doomsday could end by naturally creating the world where that story takes place. Every sacrifice, every incursion, every misunderstanding, every alliance would lead directly to that moment. It wouldn't feel like Marvel pressing a reset button. It would feel like the inevitable result of choices made throughout the entire multiverse saga. That's what makes this possibility so compelling. The ending of Doomsday wouldn't simply conclude one movie, it would completely redefine the MCU going forward. And if that happens, then one final realization becomes impossible to ignore. For years, Marvel fans have assumed Avengers Doomsday would be remembered because of the battles, the cameos, or the return of Robert Downey Jr. But what if history remembers it for a completely different reason? What if it's remembered as the film where the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as we've known it since Iron Man, finally came to an end? Not because Marvel gave up on its universe, but because destroying it was the only way to build something even bigger. That would be the ultimate meaning behind the title Doomsday. It wouldn't just refer to Earth's final day. It would represent the final day of the MCU's original reality. Of course, it's important to remember that these are still fan theories, and Marvel hasn't officially confirmed that this is exactly how Avengers Doomsday will unfold. But what's fascinating is how naturally these ideas fit together. Each theory fills in a gap left by another, creating a version of the story that feels surprisingly coherent. Whether all of them prove true or only a few become reality, one thing is certain: the stakes have never been higher. Marvel isn't simply building toward another crossover. It's building toward a moment that could permanently reshape everything we've come to know about this universe. And honestly, if even half of these theories become reality, Avengers Doomsday may not just be another Marvel event movie. It could become the single most important turning point in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, paving the way for the biggest Secret Wars adaptation fans have imagined for decades. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, share it with another Marvel fan, and subscribe for more deep dives into the MCU. And if you'd like to support the channel even more, you can send a $25 super thanks. It truly helps us keep making videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.